Good evening and welcome to the Laughing Monkey Music Show. Today we have on Steph Paynes. How are you?
Good. How are you, Sean? Nice to be here.
Good. Steph is in the legendary Lez Zeppelin, notorious because you guys have actually been doing some groundbreaking stuff, and all female, all Zeppelin.
Mm-hmm.
How are you guys doing today? How you are doing today, brother?
What's that? I'm sorry?
How are you doing today?
I am very well. I'm very well, as we were just briefly saying, because, we are finally getting back to playing a lot, and it's great. It feels so good. And, if anything, we have a whole new appreciation of our lives, so to speak.
I'd be like not playing for so long and then playing live again.
Mm-hmm.
Was it kind of like even like a nerve-wracking kind of like, because you get your mojo going, you're kind of used to a certain pattern of anything in life. Even if it's scary, you probably get used to it or something, but you don't do it at all. You're like, what's it going to be like? What's the audience going to be like? How am I going to sound? It's 2 years later. It's different. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's not only the muscle memory that you have to kind of get back. Mm-hmm. And even though you've played the song so many times, when you take a break, it is all a bit nerve-wracking. Wait, how does that go? And even just being on stage, is just a whole thing and a whole pattern. And it's an athletic event for sure. So you literally can be out of shape in a real way. Playing for 2 hours is, it takes a lot of stamina. And especially this music, which is not easy, the band is working very hard for 2 hours, not just sitting there and, strumming and humming. It's really
you gotta dial it in good
stuff. So
I've seen the videos. You guys are fantastic. And I live nearby New York, so hopefully I'll be popping in one of your shows, your New York shows, to see you in person.
Well, we play all over.
Well,
we play all over, so.
It'll be nice. Yeah. I live up in Connecticut, so most people don't usually always make it up there, so it's hit or miss.
Oh, good. Yeah.
So, have you been playing and keeping your chops up? How you been doing because you're not really playing with the band? Are you still doing some of the Zeppelin stuff? Are you just doing normal stuff, right? Your own songs, kind of what have you done to keep it going?
To be honest with you, I didn't really woodshed a lot during this period. I if anything, I stepped away a little bit. Interesting.
I've heard that. I've heard it. That's super interesting to hear that too. Everyone's had a different approach. This is really good.
I almost, it was a sort of existential moment for me of really being stopped, I should say, rather, and thinking about what would happen if this never came back. I'm not sure I totally believed it would never come back, but I wasn't sure it would come back the same way or with the same force. I wasn't sure that we'd be edged out. I wasn't, we were watching venues close. So would there even be enough places to play to really keep this as my full-time job, which is what it is,
Right.
So I sort of had an existential crisis of, what do I do? How can I move forward? What do I want to do? Do I want to do this? So I didn't really woodshed, to get back to your question, a little bit. We did some videos that were really fun. We did these fun quarantunes, we called them, where you had to pass around GarageBand tracks and then mix them all together and that kind of thing. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to get.
And then to sync it up with the audio and the video, when you really no one has no idea, you're not really just pressing a button. There's a whole production for 4 people to play and do a video, and it's a thing.
A whole big production, exactly. So
people don't realize that.
And that was fun to sort of be together. That made us all happy to do that with each other, So that was nice. That's how we sort of kept together in this.
That's interesting.
But personally, I made a whole big life change, of all sorts of things. I moved out of a too expensive apartment, and I gathered all my money and took a loan and bought a house up in Massachusetts. I'm in the Berkshires right now.
Look at you.
which I figured I've got to do something. I have to have some asset.
And you
What
bury
am
the
I-
rest of it in your backyard in mason jars, like I do, right? It's all in mason jars, the backyard, like Scrooge McDuck, guarding it.
Totally. It's great. I love a barn. I have a barn, which I think
Yeah.
will turn into a studio.
Studio, of course. That's
little
why I
by
want to have a
little.
barn.
And I started my memoir, which is long overdue. So if anything, I did, I used to be a writer, more of a, I'm always a writer, but I did writing for a living for a long time. I was a rock journalist and I wrote just all sorts of things. And that's how I made my living so I could fund my music career. So I kind of went back to this idea of I need to start writing more fluidly and need to get this book out because there's so many stories of this Lez Zeppelin craziness.
Well, it's a certain path that you don't see nowadays, these stories. I'm trying to be simple, but it's a good story. I mean, just the tidbits of it. It's a good, and rock journalism is how to get a good story.
Right.
And you can do a good, interesting story without being like seedy and gross. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You can do a good story.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not saying you can do that. It is possible. People don't always believe it, but it's very possible to just talk about music and talk about what goes on and be very interesting without being salacious.
Right. I don't care if they believe it or not, to be honest with you. Right. I mean, I think, interestingly, that you said that. The way I'm approaching this is probably partly fictional because I've written a couple of, fiction novels and I like that idea. I like, creating a world and you're not sure what is real, what isn't. And, even if you think it's real, it might not be real anyway, by the time you remember it and spit it out.
I pretend my life is fiction, so all the time. So
yeah, exactly.
I've actually seen writers that have done that too. Some rock writers that kind of like do a little mixture of stories. And what's really cool is when we're talking to musicians during this time, a lot of musicians have one other super skill that they do that's creative.
That is interesting.
Yeah. It's cooking, photography, painting, or writing.
Painting, yeah. A
lot of painters, like really good writers, a lot of really good writers. So, you being a writer doesn't surprise me, or super crazy chefs, which makes me feel like because being on the road, you really go like, I gotta go crazy in the kitchen now because I'm not on it. But the other thing is that's really good that you're doing that and you kind of find yourself. I always wonder if a lot of people are also struggling with what their identity is, like who they were. Like I'm a rocker, I'm a whatever kind of music is. You know what I'm saying? But that term of like you're a traveling musician. You're not a traveling musician all of a sudden. What are you? You're at home. You're kicking around the house. What are you going to do? You're going to get a job down at Home Depot. Or you're going to get a job so and so. What are you going to do to keep your time filled? Whether it's about money or it isn't about money. It's about like what are you going to do with that time? And also, who are you?
Exactly. No, that's exactly it very well put. What I went through to a certain extent. I mean, there was a point where I was calling my banker and saying maybe I should go into investment banking, and they got all excited. You want to join the team? Literally, I started researching. I've got to take this, couple of tests for, banking, I guess license or something.
Yep.
the Series 7 or whatever it's called. I mean, I really was trying to kick around. What am I? And I think you're right. I mean, I think not every musician, but a lot of people who are in the arts do a lot of things.
Yeah.
They felt this need to pursue their art at great risk to having a decent lifestyle. Right. And then if suddenly that is taken away, you wonder what other skills, what can I do? What might have I done? Or that's not grammatically correct.
You'll figure out how to say it much more better.
By the time this is over, I'll figure it. I have to write it down. What might I have done?
Oh, there you go.
Maybe right. My mother would correct me. She's an English.
That might be the title of this episode too. What might I'll do that
what
actually.
What might I have done?
Right.
What I might have done, but then it's different. What might I have done? I don't know. You figure it out. You're the journalist.
I don't know about that.
But yeah, I think there are lots of things that are in people's, lots of arrows in their quiver, so to speak.
Yeah,
fish a new one out and see what happens.
I think it's been some good discovery.
We're back to music to a certain extent.
Right. But now, it's like less scary. It's like, oh,
Mhm.
I can do something else. I am actually something more than this identity I've kind of carved out, because you try
Right.
so hard to get your band or your music known. It becomes you, like entirely you. Not like, oh, I'm
Right.
a mom or I'm a dad or I'm a gardener, I'm a this, I'm a uncle, I'm a sister, you're like, I'm a rocker. And you just totally nose the grind to get noticed. And then the challenge is, then grunge came and kind of kicked rock in the shins. I mean, rock wasn't helping itself by eating itself alive by copycats at a certain point,
Uh-huh.
but it wiped it out. But then rock coming back
Yeah.
gladly and stronger, I almost think it's weathered. It's going to last now. I mean, so this COVID thing is like, well, we've gone through worse. We've gone through
Yeah.
shoegazing. We're going to go through this. I mean, it's always still going to be there. How are we going to do?
Yeah.
Because the new thing is now, what has evolved is people on Instagram and TikTok, and this is like the old man and me, get off my lawn, are all in their bedrooms and they have thousands of hits and they're super talented, but they can't play a club.
Right.
They can't fill a club. But then you get an artist that's done platinum albums that won't get the attention because a media company's like, how many followers do you have on Instagram? I don't know. I'm a rocker. I've got a platinum album and a Grammy album. I've been touring my whole life. I don't need a device. I can play a show in front of 20,000 people.
Right.
That world is kind of colliding in a weird way, because
That's
media
interesting.
companies want promotional companies want a lot of the big, these hits, and they're not really anything. You don't know like how many hits you get on one thing and then on the other. And it doesn't always transition into buys and counts and clicks. It's all make believe,
Yeah.
and it comes down to who's going to go to the show,
Well, yes, because I mean, unless you become one of these influencers, I guess there are people sending you money, which I understand happens. I mean, I am such a Luddite to a certain extent when it comes to that some of the girls in the band are a bit more up to speed on that, and I should say probably more interested in it than I am completely. I have a almost 98% lack of interest in that. But I have to do it. I realize I have to do it. And we have like 1.6 million followers on Facebook. How that happened, I don't know.
And that's it. The media thing is hard and it's a challenge for everybody. It's always good if you have somebody in your band that wants to do it over you, because you don't have to do it. And the balance of how much media do you put into your art? Are you taking away from your time for your art? I know like some musicians are like, all right, turn off the phone. I don't even bring the phone in. Go in the studio. It's studio time. You start doing your time in blocks because it's so easy to have your device right in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
And just pick up. Let me just check that one email. I'm expecting an email. Let me just check it. Next thing you know, you're watching dogs on YouTube. That'd be me. Actually, it'd be me on Instagram. I watch animals on Instagram. I'm dark, but
yeah, the cat videos.
The
baby videos.
Yep, all those crazy videos I'm getting sent back and forth. Me and my wife. That's all we do. I think there's other reasons for the internet too, but I'm not too sure. But yeah, so that's really important. So, also taking a break. Were you still playing guitar at all, or were you? Because I know some people actually took their guitars and just put them down for months. I know big guitar players are like, yeah, I didn't touch it.
I didn't touch it a lot.
Do you have calluses?
I mean, when we started doing the quarantunes, I did more. I pick them up again, but there was so much else to like that occupied my frontal lobes. Like how was I going to sign on to this unemployment? How was I going to survive? Where was I going to go? There was, I think people, I don't know if people forget, but for people like us in this business, 2020, by the second half of March, we played our last gig in March 12th, 2020.
Yep.
We were supposed to down in Annapolis at Ram's Head on stage. It was a great, fantastic sold out show or whatever it was. We were supposed to go and do some radio benefit the next day. The guy canceled on us. He was crying. He was so upset. And we shut the doors at the gig we played that night. They shut the doors behind us. By the end of that month, we were all in a state of absolute panic. So, and by the time April came around, it was like nervous breakdown city, basically, everything that we had just said, how am I surviving?
For somebody that had jobs, I'm sorry, we had jobs, that you had to like, how's my job going to work? Your job is actually people industry, being around people.
Correct.
And that's just
our job. disappeared. Now, some of the other girls were teaching, they were working, my drummer does security or whatever. Marlene has voiceovers and acting gigs here and there. Lez Zeppelin is my job. So
you are the founder.
Yeah.
And a proud parent.
Right. Proud being in parentheses. Some days I'm proud, some days I'm horrified.
Oh, come on.
Yeah. So that just, there was no job. Hence the existential crisis that we had discussed. But, for me, it was almost, it wasn't comforting in a way to pick up my guitar. For me, it was almost sort of, this is, not working. It's not going to work. What do I do? So I kind of put it down for a while. I rode my bicycle a lot. I, tried to figure stuff out. I had time with my family. I have 2 boys, and that was glorious. To have time with my son, and he was into riding bicycles all over. So I joined him. I got, he was trying to do high school it was just horrible.
But the family thing also is the big thing for a lot of musicians. They're like, oh my God. Right. They're like, I don't think I can go back on the road like this again. A lot of bands are like, I don't think I could do it. But then once they get out there and the tours and the managers, it might change again. But I think it's given some new perspective to some people that were just always on the road, or always feeling guilty, or always, the spouse at home trying to balance the weight of a family. It's not about the money. It's just work. It's just like being traveling, whatever.
Exactly. I mean, Lez Zeppelin is almost 18 years now. And we were touring consistently early on when my boys were babies. And that's a whole other story. But that you probably don't want to get into that. But, there were, let's just say in a nutshell, I have yet to meet another woman on the road. And I'm not talking about Madonna or Lady Gaga's range. I'm talking about someone like me who's really in a working band, pounding the pavement with babies doing that.
I can't imagine that.
And leaving the babies. I have not met another one yet. So maybe I'm out of my mind, but this was something that I had always dreamed of doing. So I did it. But, I had a lot of time at home on and off, and I had nannies and stuff like that. But, this real months of every day having my kid was amazing. And, look, the kids weren't in school either. So they were also at home. So that
you were with them so long now, you can actually say, God, I need a break from them without feeling guilty, because you're not leaving the road. You're like, I get it. I need a break.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't mind. I didn't want a break.
I'm joking. I'm joking.
Yeah. No, some would. Look, we had fights. I wanted a break. But no, it was glorious. It was really nice. And, I felt bad for them because they really missed out on school.
Yeah.
I had one in college and I had to pull him out. It was awful. Yeah. Awful.
My kids have loved it. They don't like people like me. I would have been fine with this. If I was in high school, I would like, it's great. I can wear my pajamas. I could just dial in from my bedroom. It'd be the best thing ever. I could, if I never see a person again, besides going to shows, that's the only thing that's got me out of my house, shows and food.
Yeah, I wouldn't have minded so much either. You're a hermit kind of person.
But I felt bad at first. And then my kids were like, nah, didn't even faze them. Wow. I was like, oh, all right, there you go then. But for some kids that are so out there, like in sports and different activities, that is hard.
They have friends. Well, they had bubbles, but still. Yeah. So anyway, a long way around your question. I did not sit and pick up my guitar every day and figure out how I could sound even more like Jimmy Page, or maybe going back to trying to sound like Jimi Hendrix or something like that. On and off, I did some stuff. But it was more of a letting go of doing almost everything, which is a rare moment to have in life, actually. For someone who's so driven, you're so driven all the time. It was this moment of just everything comes to a halt, which is when you look back on it now, having survived it,
right?
And we're getting back to it. Was it a weird sort of gift?
Yep. A lot of artists say that, like, they don't want to say it in a bad way because there have been some losses for people, but in some way it has given an opportunity by taking the good and the bad and making it, you know what I mean? It's opened to the doors for other people. And it's changed the situation up for certain people, which has been great, you know. Um, I imagine a lot of people also fell back in love with music again. They weren't so
Well,
burned out.
I think it forces the issue. Do I still love this?
Mm-hmm.
Do I want to do it anymore? It's a lot of work. It's a lot of hassle. It is all these things. You know, where do I stand with regard to this? I have a chance to maybe go do something else.
Yep.
And I think that that's part of the reckoning, you know, am I still interested in this? So, you know, I think that all of us came out of it as, yes, we all wanted, I mean, the band is gung-ho. They might even be more gung-ho than I am. You know, seriously, they are so happy to be back on the road. And I love them for that. I mean, they're, you know, I feel very fortunate because I could have lost the band, you know, easily. So we're all happy doing that. But I also think that, you know, certainly for me, I definitely want to pursue other things too. Most specifically, getting back into a habit of writing more. Yeah. That is what I ended up with. And I always end up with that. Quelle surprise. I've gone through this a million times in my life, having chosen to do music, because I was the kind of person that I could have probably been an investment banker. I probably could have gone to, you know, medical school even, which, you know, I've always sort of been interested in that. Or most specifically, being a foreign correspondent, writing for a newspaper, or that always was a romantic, I think, for me. So
different from touring.
It's a different kind of touring. Yeah.
It's very different from touring too. You're very totally different worlds. Those jobs are all very different.
Very different.
Different excitement.
Yeah. Excitement.
What is the future now for Lez Zeppelin? How's it going to be balanced out now? I mean, what are you gonna do? Change it up a little bit or what?
Well, we always try to reinvent it somehow. You know, the last thing we did was a record. We had every intention of going out and playing the string section and doing a sort of string, not an orchestra thing, because that's been done. And I don't really want to tone it down. But having a quartet or, you know, a small string section is super cool, because it first of all, for the guitar parts, the strings can handle. There are so many guitar parts in those records.
Oh yeah.
You know, when you're playing as a 4-piece, basically a power trio and vocals, you have to do what Led Zeppelin did live. You have to somehow just get the live power of it, but there's so many parts that go missing. So with the strings, it was really fun to hear some of that and have that. So we were doing that. We did a record called The Island of Skiros, where we had some of those arrangements that we had come up with for live performances. We recorded, and all of that went down, you know. They
can buy it on their website. It's on your website.
Yes,
they can buy it. People
can buy it at lezzeppelin.com.
And there's some shirts there and everything else. There's some cool stuff there on the site. So
there's all sorts of
let's plug that.
Underpants.
It's exactly what I think about. I think of rock and roll.
Yeah, yes, you must go to lezzeppelin.com and check it out. But yeah, there's some fun stuff, and the record's really cool. So I think we're talking about, you know, now we had built up this physical graffiti show that we put together with multimedia aspect. And physical graffiti had always been a dream to do. And we only recently figured out how to do it. So it's been taking all this time, because it's got a lot of stuff in there that, you know, Led never played live. They never played it. It's near impossible to play live with 4 people. Yeah. Like in the light. Forget about it. You have to figure out, you know, it's sort of this gymnastic thing. I step on pedals with drones, and Joan is playing 2 keyboards and switching sounds. And then there's this way you have to somehow come together and do it. And it's really, really fun. And it's very challenging. So we're taking this physical graffiti show on the road and doing it in a lot
physical graffiti, right?
The what?
It's very putting the physical and physical graffiti.
Yeah.
All the movements in there, right?
We're getting physical with graffiti.
Yeah. It's actually important because there really aren't a lot of really good bands. I know you're not a fan of the term tribute band, you weren't. And to me, it's just words. It's just a good band, and it's not a lot of good bands. And it's good to have the more female artists, the better, in my opinion. My daughter plays bass. My other kid plays guitar. So I love that they have people they can look up to that are also, female. So to have someone rock out like that. But there's also not a lot of Zeppelin bands out there either that can really do
there
it.
are a fair
No,
amount.
that can really do it well though. That really do it differently.
Well, that ask Jimmy. Yeah. Well, the thing about the tribute, just to clarify it, when I started the band, I didn't even know what a tribute band was. I know that sounds like bull crap. I really did not know what a tribute band was. I was a jazz head. I was this, I was that, but I had never been in a cover band, except for jazz where you play standards. So what is this thing? I started this band to have fun playing Led Zeppelin, which was also kind of naive because having fun playing Led Zeppelin is like 6 months of rehearsals later, you realize this is right. Heavy duty stuff. So suddenly I actually got a message from some other tribute band out in California. Hey, welcome. We have a band called a tribute band site. Come and sign up. And I sort of remember my feeling of what? And I went over to this site and I thought, no. This is not what we are doing. And the reason I thought that is because in my mind, a tribute band is a band that impersonates a band. So, the tribute band of guys doing Led Zeppelin is they get the dragon suit and they get the wigs and they copy all the moves and they try to sound as much like the band as you can. So there's some guy trying to sing like Robert Plant as close as possible. And in my opinion, the more you try to sound like them, the more you will not sound like them. It's a sort of paradox thing. I mean, first of all, we were off the hook because we're girls, so we had a little more leverage with that. And Led Zeppelin, funnily, they kind of were girly. So suddenly there was this whole interesting dynamic of doing the gender bending from the other end. So we kind of met each other in the middle. They were very elegant and girly. I mean, right. Jimmy Page was a sylph, with his beautiful hair, and Robert was wearing girls' shirts and, this, Yeah. It's almost like mincing, like, oh, my backdrop.
There was your background.
My background. So we were kind of getting on a bit of a boyish groove and coming at it from the other end. It was so interesting. That aspect became a whole thing in and of itself. But, I sort of intuitively felt that we need to take this music within ourselves, learn their vibe, I need to learn how to play like Jimmy Page. Okay. And then I have to go out there and just let it go. And that's really super hard. That's like a classical musician interpreting a Paganini violin concerto. It's just, you got to get the chops and you got to get the dynamics and learn where Jimmy might have gone. But then you have to know where not to just play exactly what he played. Because it's in my opinion, why do that? He's going to play it better anyway. Right. It's never going to be as good. I mean, I'm not Jimmy. I'm Jimmy-like.
Well, there's similarities. It's hard. I think the problem is, and to me, like a tribute band has almost a negative thing because you're thinking of a weekend party band that just aren't, they do the best they can, and they're, it's like buckshot at a barn for the sound.
Yes, right.
But but also there's a level of tribute bands where you can do, Zappa, Pink Floyd, and Zeppelin, and maybe the Doors. to be that level where you're recognized by the artists and other bands.
Mhm.
Well, it's still sort of a tribute sorts to the band. It's not the same level, and I think it's hard as an artist to get mushed with the Weekend band if you want a
Yes.
wig to somebody that does
Yes.
the similarities. But there are such similarities that for the disconcerting eye, people are like, they don't really, it's just a really good version than the other. You know what I mean?
I know exactly.
Because you guys do dress very 70s and very Zeppelin. You've had some outfits that are very Jimmy Pagey,
Yes, I've had them made for me. They're not exactly his
Right.
his suits, but there are people that go out and make his suits, note for note, stitch for stitch. Fine,
Yeah.
that's fine. I'm not judging it. I just feel like it's a different thing. I feel like that's not what we are, and it's very hard to sell that. I mean, people don't really understand what we're talking about. I
Right.
mean, and they don't. For the most part, if they're not presented with the two, with a difference, they don't really know, or maybe they don't care. They want to go have a beer and hear some
Right.
Zeppelin, that serves the purpose, and they're happy. If you give them what we have, their minds explode.
Right.
But, if they can get exposed to it, because there's something different about it and they don't even know what it is, but they know that there's something that's way more intense and way more powerful, even though we're not dressed like them or even sound, our singer doesn't sound like Robert Plant. She's just, none of the singers that I've had have sounded like Robert Plant.
Robert Plant can't sound like Robert Plant.
Right. and someone who tries to imitate him doesn't really sound like him. It sounds like some sort of, I don't know, hokey version of him, which, I don't know, to me is worse, because it's not Robert Plant. And the more you hear the difference between someone trying to be Robert Plant and Robert Plant, the more it doesn't sound like him. You know what I mean? That's the paradoxical thing. But
I think you honor the music if you can honor the music. I mean, guitars and instruments, you can recreate the sounds very similar in a big paintbrush and the collage of the sounds, And the thing is with Zeppelin, you're right. I mean, Jimmy Page did have you put like 35 guitars on every track and some crazy string instruments you've never heard of, and and then even his guitar solos and the live things with this and that. There were mistakes in his music too. The way he was playing so fast, it just feels sloppy but real. You know what I mean? There's a feel that you don't get if you just copying it. It's a vibe thing.
There's no question. Jimmy's playing is like a train barreling down the track that may veer off any minute and crash. Okay. Yeah. That is exciting. And I've had this argument with a lot of guitar players who say, no. You've got to be prepared. You've got to know your solo. You've got to and I'm more reckless. And I veer off the track. I mean, I will bomb. I know, and I probably should work harder. There's no question that I could do. But to me, the spirit of that, of just jumping off the cliff into this wild solo, I deeply believe that you are not going to hit a genius level of playing in a moment unless you do that. So while I might bomb more than the other Zeppelin guy in his band, I'm going to tell you, when I don't bomb and I get it right in a moment of fire and passion where this stuff is just coming out, that guy's not going to do that. Right. It's not going to happen. And I live for that.
Well, that's exactly it. That's what makes it exciting.
That's what it's about.
If you're the other side, if you were just covering it exactly note for note, you may have been a journalist right now and been done with it, because then but it's exciting to do this, to go off the tracks every night. You really don't know. And if you listen to any Jimmy stuff, a real Zeppelin fan knows Jimmy really played the same thing. I mean, the riffs are there for the main songs, of course.
Right. Exactly.
But Jimmy really meandered all over that neck all the time.
Right.
Right. To the point where it's to the point is genius, and just, is he paying attention? It's just, you always feel like you're like, is he? Oh wow, genius! He's always back and forth. You're like, where's he? Oh yeah, I see that now. The normal person doesn't see that.
Oh, I will tell you, and Jimmy might argue with me and slap my wrist, but I think, because I do the same thing. no, he's veering off the rail,
Right.
and he pulls himself back. And you know,
How far can you push it? How far can you push it to go the other way? How far can you push it?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, it's a mistake in a way, maybe. I mean, kind of. I mean, maybe that was, not in the, microtonal scale that should have, been within this other scale. But okay, you pull back, you get back into it, you veer out because you want to explore, or you simply make a mistake.
That's what every guitarist, real guitarist does. I mean,
like,
no, but I mean, playing
Hendrix
chords
had bad
chords.
nights. He had
Hendrix,
bad nights. Greatest guitarist ever. I mean, what?
Yeah. I mean, and the thing is, like, even Eddie Van Halen will play tones and chords. You're like, is that a chord? But then you peel it back. You're like, oh my God, it's brilliant, because like, how'd you get that transition?
Right.
Back is like that. Where you're like, what? And it's
Right.
like you can't wrap your mind around it, especially being like a musician or playing it. It doesn't make sense the way you learn guitar. You build a song, the notes and the chords, and you're like, where did that come from? And that's part of the genius that most people don't get when you just listen to it, because you just want to hear the song. But as a musician, you listen to, you go, oh, that's weird. I wouldn't expect that there. I'd expect something else there.
Right.
And that's and you're like, well, that's what I like about it.
Exactly. And that's, I love that too. I mean, I started with jazz and I went backwards to rock, because most people, they play rock and they play blues, and then they get bored of that and they want to go get heavy with jazz, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is really hard. Okay. So it's usually that is the end game, not the beginning game. I studied jazz a lot when I was, really young. And it took me a while to play rock, because I was like, I mean, I couldn't really, like hit the one right. And the three. I was like on the backbeat all the time, behind the beat. And interestingly, that contributed a couple of things. One, that adventurous kind of, I need to improvise. Improvisation.
Jazz, right? That makes sense. Your background of jazz to
right.
To lead
it is the most important thing. That is why you play jazz, because you play the head of the tune and then you improvise. But the other thing it does, and I think that this is another thing, I once had a very in-depth, well, every once in a while, I have a very in-depth interview with a guitar magazine or something. The thing about Jimmy Page and about John Bonham that most people just cannot get, in my opinion, they just miss it because they can't hear it and they can't play it, is that they're really not on the beat a lot of the time. And it is a laid back, behind the beat feel that's ever so slight, not quite as delayed as when you're playing jazz, but it is like that. So if you are really schooled in that, if that is your feel, then I believe that you're able to understand what those guys are doing, because that's what they're doing. JPJ is holding it, and those other two guys are like ever so loose around that rhythm, and that's what makes it sexy, and that's what makes it move like that. And it's a hard thing for just straight ahead players. Blues,
well, it's a challenge for an artist to play in the pocket. That's the one goal for most musicians.
Yeah.
But then, Page would take it one further, where he's kind of like, he wants, like, he's going to fall out of the pocket, but he's in the pocket. Right. Like you're not so in it. And that's the whole point. Like what you're saying is you're not out of it, but you're not really in it 100%. And that's like the next level. If you can just, as a musician, if you just play in the pocket, you're lucky.
That's right.
Like, thank you.
That's right.
That's great. That's a gift.
Totally. That's a good way to put it.
Right out of the gate, though, Page is like, yeah, I can do the pocket thing, but let me just see what else I can do. If I can dance around the pocket, if I can, maneuver it.
He can dance around the pocket because his drummer could.
Yeah.
And that's what he's missing in his life now. I mean, they had John Paul Jones in there to just hold the whole house down.
And he did so well,
magnificent.
So good.
He was so there, so solid that you could just dance around him, and so could Bonham. I mean, they were in a pocket Two, however, Bonham was in his own like insane world of feel. Like it is like nobody plays like him. I mean, it's just, I still, after all this time, will listen to a Led Zeppelin track I've heard a million times, even something like Trampled Underfoot, it's pretty straight ahead the whole time. And you just cannot believe what his feel is like. I mean, he's just, got that thing which is just behind, and Jimmy's playing with him. And the two of them, if you took away the bass player, they'd probably be like, wait a minute, quantize that track or something, somebody quantize it. It's out of sync, because that's what it is. And it's beautiful. And our human ears hear that, and we're so happy.
Well, when I hear it, I'm like, don't you sometimes hear that? It feels like it's kind of missing something. Like I always hear these things in it. I'm like, but because you're thinking like that certain way, and everyone's like, no. But I think there's different ways you can listen to Zeppelin like it's on the radio. I think Zeppelin, Zappa, AC/DC, Van Halen, and Pink Floyd are probably the five that you hear one thing on the radio, and the masses love it. But if you put your headphones on, or if you just put your listening ears on, there's a whole nother thing under the hood that you're hearing that you're not hearing, that's there, that's allowing you to hear the other stuff that's so deep and technical that you don't get it.
Yeah.
The simplicity of the chords of AC/DC, or the weird pieces that Eddie's coming up with, or Gilmore, or and then Jimmy Page, the 35 guitars and mandolins and
right.
shovels with strings he's coming up with, whatever he decides he wants on the track.
Right.
Yeah. He does.
It's very deep. The layers are deep in lots of different ways, and sort of directions. It's not just harmonic, it's not just rhythmic, it's all over there's all sorts of stuff going on. Which is why I could play this music 18 years in and still get off on it, and still just fly into some other zone and enjoy it as the highest form of, playing. Because the other thing that it requires is the band has to play together in a way that is pretty much extinct, as we were talking about. Nobody does that anymore. Nobody stands in the middle of the stage huddling together with each other, laughing and playing and throwing shit back and forth. I mean, that is a lost art. And in my mind, it's the highest form of that genre, whether it was Cream or The Who, or The Who is a little more structured, but I mean, just that getting in the middle with each other and communicating.
I would have liked to see Blind Faith. I would say, one album, I would have liked to see what the musicians of Blind Faith would have done if they stayed together, like with the drummer, and Clapton,
Ginger Baker, yeah.
Yeah, right. Like I would love to see those guys actually go on without killing each other for a couple albums, and see where they got, because being so bored of being a hit, like go, let's go the other way. Like what would they have done? Because once again, a really crazy drummer, like that's out of their mind musically, not just potentially out of their mind, but musically. And then, in Clapton back then, would have been a very similar, yep, I'm like touching Clapton right now. Yeah, but at that point, when he was like in 75 different bands, and I'm talking, back then, it was so experimental.
Yeah.
What would have happened, and the best blueprint we have is what Page and Bonham did,
Right.
And what were they like? Was it like 10, 11 years? How long were they together for? I didn't even, Zeppelin.
I think it was like 9 years. It was 11 albums. No.
Okay.
11 years, 9 albums. Sorry.
All right. Well, so I was kind of close. It's hard because it's just like the Beatles. It's like all these bands with that small window of time, these magnificent, huge things of all the songs in the world. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then they imploded, and the rest of life, everyone's trying to catch up to them. Like, how can you do that? And I tell you, it's a shame when you see, like, I can see both levels. Like, Zeppelin should get back together. And I'm with Robert. Like, if he can't sing it and he doesn't do it, and it's not right, you shouldn't force it, because it was a magic moment. But then if you have somebody like Jimmy Page, it's like having a race car sitting inside and not being used, or like when somebody buys like a record and they don't wrap it out of the vinyl. Like I can't have nothing. I'm not that guy. I get a good record, rip it up. It's on my record player. You know what I mean? I can't. I have to display things. Jimmy Page can't be on display. He's just too good to not be still doing it if he doesn't want to do it.
Right. Well, I have to defend Jimmy in this. I mean, I just feel like,
I'm not knocking him. I'm saying he's so good. If he doesn't want to do it, that's one thing. But he's just so good.
Of course, but although I mean, it's a lot of work to get back to what he was doing in his prime. He can do it, but it's intense. But I think the thing is, and I don't know, I'm going out on a limb because I have met Jimmy a few times, but I'm not vying for knowing him inside out. But I think that artistically, I might understand him a little bit because I've spent so much time inside his head and I run this band like he does. It's very daunting. It is really daunting to try to go out after you've had a band like Led Zeppelin and do anything. I mean, I get it. It's like, oh my God. Being someone like Jimmy is like, it better be good. Like, it's got to be great, or I'm going to just, and I think that it's just frightening. It's like, how am I going to do that? How am I going to get a band together? It's like, what are people going to say? How am I going to even manage it? How am I going to find I think it's just, it's a high bar.
It is,
and
and
it's just too much. It's like, he doesn't have, he's redoing all his,
right.
The band stuff.
No, I just mean as a musician, because I'm one of the probably one of me and 10,000 people that just want to hear, you got to be exactly who you are. I'm like, no, you're just such a creative artist. And if you're still doing it and enjoying it, you should keep doing it. Take a left turn, just become a ukulele player. You're such a good musician.
Yeah.
You're still competing against what you did. You can't be that. You already did it. How are you going to outdo
Paul
it?
Jones does that. That's what he does.
I loved him in them Crooked Vultures. He's doing all kinds of little parts and stuff.
All sorts.
I love that Jimmy went and did the thing with the Crows because he was out there playing again. He doesn't have to do Zeppelin again. I just think he's so good playing. And it's a shame because you're right. He is going to be held to that. It's not a Zeppelin. You can't create that. There will never be another Zeppelin. You cannot create those riffs.
But I also think that's his big child. It's his baby. He's in love with Led Zeppelin. He always will be. It's his thing. It's like, I'm not sure he has room in his genius brain to really want to or come up with anything else, and that's okay.
But that's fine. That's fine.
That might be it.
Pigeonhole though.
You can't play it and remain unchanged. If you play it for any length of time at all and remain unchanged, you're not playing it right. And that's all I'll say about that. But it changes you, and it has magical powers, and that's I think that Jimmy is under its spell, is under the spell of the thing he created. I'm under it too. It got me too. I'm like, I get it. I can't go out and form a band either. I'm like, and I know why. It's really a weird thing. Maybe it'll be in my memoir. I'll figure it out.
What about writing songs though? Like, because you have that.
What about it? Why don't I? I've written 1 million songs, right?
Well, I'm asking you, like, how does it feel to you? Like, oh, I can't write because it's not a Zeppelin song, or it's separate. It's not Zeppelin because you're not.
I know. Again. Well, we've written some. I've written some since, and a lot of instrumental stuff. But it is I don't know. I'm
just asking you personally because I don't think it's the wrong answer. I think
devil has his choke on me.
I like devil's advocate. I think a musician should do. That's my point. Jimmy Page should do whatever they want.
Right.
And but I know the real world. I'm not an idiot. And the world's not going to judge you that way. And as a musician, you're probably going to be even harder than the whole entire world. Jimmy's going to rate himself harder than the entire world that loves Led Zeppelin.
Exactly.
Totally together, millions of people. He will still hold himself to a higher grade than all of them. Right. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for being on the show. It's a little short ending here. We're going to pick this up. We'll call this a part 1, and then we'll pick up in the next month or so, and we'll dig on to this talk. And I want everybody to check out the links and check out the show. I want to thank you for being on.
Absolute pleasure, Sean.
Thank you very much.